Morning everyone. Hope you had a really good enterprise session on Monday and Tuesday. I was in school on Monday and worked with quite a few of the year sevens who were making their smoothies and they were working really well and doing a really good job. So hopefully you were doing the same at home if you were at home. We're moving on to the last chapter of Coraline today, which has been beautifully timed. Why is it not working? Beautifully timed because we've only got one lesson left on Friday. So hopefully that will give you some time to be able to watch the film if you haven't already. Okay, so we're going to read chapter 13 today. So you'll do now today, you've got your two pieces of work that you did last lesson to mark. So let's just go through them together. So the answers then. So Coraline said that she tripped when her parents asked about her knee, but doesn't give any more information, so dismisses it. Why do you think Coraline's parents don't seem to remember being trapped by the other mother? There's no explanation for that really. It doesn't say it specifically. So I've just tried to come up with a few ideas or reasons why it might potentially happen, and you can choose those, or if you came up with your own idea, that's fine. What does Coraline do with the key to the passageway? So she uses it to set a trap for the hand, doesn't she? And it falls down the well. How have Coraline's parents changed? And again, it doesn't really say a lot about that. The only thing I've really noticed is that the cooking is still terrible. The thing that has changed really is Coraline's attitude to them. So she's more appreciative of them, isn't she? And her mum is concerned about Coraline falling over. What does Coraline do with the marbles? So she puts them under her pillow. Describe Coraline's dream. So she's having a picnic with the souls, isn't she? Under an oak tree in a meadow, and they're playing childhood games together in the field, and it's almost like a bit of a goodbye between Coraline and the other souls, isn't it? That they're leaving her now. And then what is Coraline warned about? The Bedlam swore by her good right hand and she lied. And what does the other mother's hand want? It wanted the key. Okay. So what I've done, I haven't copied these onto the picture with the hand, but I've just highlighted some of the quotations that you might have used to decorate your hand with. Remember, we were talking about its appearance and also the way that it acted as well. So we've got the fact that it was scuttling. Is that an adjective or a verb? Can you remember? Hopefully you'll remember that that's a verb because it's a doing word, isn't it? The fact that it's part of the shadows, that it detached itself from behind the couch. It's scuttling, tapping, clicking. So you've got onomatopoeia there, haven't you? Sound words. And then we've got the fact that it used to be attached to the other mother's body, obviously, and putting the beetles into her mouth. And then we've got the cliffhanger, haven't we? Because it wanted the black key. Okay. So hopefully that's given you some ideas for last week's work, so you'll be able to mark them. Okay. Then, before we read chapter 13, which is what we're going to be doing today, I'd like you to just look at the story endings below and think about what is wrong with them. So if you were given those as a story ending, or if you were one of those was read to you in a story, would you be happy with it? Or would you be disappointed in it? And if you're disappointed in it, why? What's wrong with it? What has the writer not done? So the first one, I woke up and it was all a dream. If I've taught you this year, you will know my reaction to that one. They all went home and went to bed. Their parents told them off and they never did it again. And their teacher was cross and they missed their break. So just pause the video for me again and just write down what you think is wrong with each of those story endings. Okay? So hopefully, when you had a read of them yourself, you kind of thought that they were boring, that they were repetitive. They didn't give enough information, did they? They're shutting the story down too quickly. Their parents told them off and they never did it again. So you could have had a really big build up to a story with lots of interesting things happening, and then all of a sudden it's ended. And it is resolved because it's saying that they never did it again, but it's not resolved in any kind of interesting way. And we spend a lot of time on coming up with really interesting story openings and trying to engage the reader. And it's the same with the ending as well, that you need to put as much focus and attention into your ending as you do your beginning. And the last one, their teacher was cross and they missed their break. Again, that's the same kind of ending as the parents one, isn't it? That there is a resolution, but it's short and quick and not kind of satisfactory. All right. So we're just going to look at some features of good story endings. Right, and you may want to just have a think of some of the stories that you've read that you've really enjoyed, and the endings either left you wanting more, so wanting to read another one in the series, or kind of had a twist at the end that you completely didn't expect. I read the first Christmasaurus with my son last Christmas, and the ending of that is really good if you want a plot twist. And I'm not going to give it away because it will spoil it, but it's got a really good ending to it with a complete twist at the end which shocks you. All right, so that's another good way of ending a story, isn't it? You can have they all lived happily ever after, but you need to think of an interesting way of doing it. And often people like to read a story where the hero succeeds or there's something nice at the end, but it's about making it interesting, isn't it? And hopefully the writer of Coraline does that when we read chapter 13. So, good endings. An ending which is expected for the genre. So, for example, in a fairy story, the heroine marries the handsome prince and the wicked character is punished. So that was what we were talking about with They All Lived Happily Ever After, that kind of thing. Linking to this, rewarding or punishing characters for their behaviour according to the part they played in the story. You never want the villain, do you, to escape. You want there to be some kind of comeuppance for them. So you want them to be some kind of finality of it, all right? Character learns a lesson which protects him or her against future danger. So it might be that the main character isn't perfect, but actually from whatever happened in the story, they learn their lesson, don't they? They change or they improve. Resolve or explain unanswered questions, which is really important. Sometimes writers are criticised because they come up with some really good ideas and put lots of kind of bits of webs into their story, but they never finish them or they don't tie them together in a good way. So it's really important that you do that. Characters discover a solution to a problem, so kind of linking into these. Calm and order are restored to a community which has been in turmoil. So I don't think as a reader or when you're watching a film you ever want to leave something that's unfinished, do you? You want to see how it turns out and that it all kind of sorts itself out. Or, this is kind of a plot twist, dangerous or menacing elements turn out to be harmless. So actually, something that you expected to be bad or dangerous turns out to be quite harmless. And again, going back to stories that I've been reading with my children, there are quite a few children's stories like that. You know, the picture books where they're building up to something and the characters are really scared, but actually at the end, the monster is kind or just wants to play or kind of be involved with them. So you could use that as an idea as well, all right? Or other writers. You're not writing today. Okay, so just thinking about those features, what I would like you to do as you're reading chapter 13 or listening to chapter 13 is see which one or which few of these Neil Gaiman uses in his ending, all right? So see if he resolves everything or resolves some things. Is there a solution to the problem? Do they restore calm and order? And you can kind of just tick them off or just make a mental note of them as you're reading. Okay?
Chapter 13. Coraline's parents never seemed to remember anything about their time in the snow globe. At least they never said anything about it, and Coraline never mentioned it to them. Sometimes she wondered whether they had ever noticed that they had lost 2 days in the real world, and came to the eventual conclusion that they had not. Then again, there are some people who keep track of every day and every hour, and there are people who don't. And Coraline's parents were solidly in the second camp. Coraline had placed the marbles beneath her pillow before she went to sleep that first night home in her own room once more. She went back to bed after she saw the other mother's hand, although there was not much time left for sleeping, and she rested her head back on that pillow. Something scrunched gently as she did. She sat up and lifted the pillow. The fragments of the marbles that she saw looked like the remains of eggshells one finds in springtime, like empty, broken robin's eggs, or even more delicate, wren's eggs, perhaps. Whatever had been inside the glass spheres had gone. Coraline thought of the 3 children waving goodbye to her in the moonlight, waving before they crossed that silver stream. She gathered up the eggshell-thin fragments with care and placed them in a small blue box, which had once held a bracelet that her grandmother had given her when she was a little girl. The bracelet was long lost, but the box remained. Miss Spink and Miss Forcible came back from visiting Miss Spink's niece, and Coraline went down to their flat for tea. It was a Monday. On Wednesday, Coraline would go back to school. A whole new school year would begin. Miss Forcible insisted on reading Coraline's tea leaves. "Well, looks like everything's mostly ship-shape and Bristol fashion, lovey," said Miss Forcible. "Sorry?" said Coraline. "Everything is coming up roses," said Miss Forcible. "Well, almost everything. I'm not sure what that is." She pointed to a clump of tea leaves sticking to the side of the cup. Miss Spink tutted and reached for the cup. "Honestly, Miriam, give it over here. Let me see." She blinked through her thick spectacles. "Oh, dear. No, I have no idea what that signifies. It looks almost like a hand." Coraline looked. The clump of leaves did look a little like a hand, reaching for something. Hamish, the Scotty dog, was hiding under Miss Forcible's chair, and he wouldn't come out. "I think he was insulted. He has a deep gash in his side. We'll take him to the vet later this afternoon. I wish I knew what could have done it." Something, Coraline knew, would have to be done. That final week of the holidays, the weather was as if the summer itself were trying to make up for the miserable weather they had been having by giving them some bright and glorious days before it ended. The crazy old man upstairs line when he saw her coming out of Miss Spink and Forcible's flat. "Hey, hi! You, Caroline!" he shouted over the radio. "Coraline," she said. "It's frightened them," said the old man, scratching his mustache. "I think maybe there is a weasel in the house. Something is about. I heard night. It must be a trap for it. Maybe put down a little meat or hamburger. And when the creature comes to feast, then eat and never bother us more. The mice are so scared they will not even pick up their little musical instruments." "I don't think it wants meat," said Coraline. She put her hand up and touched the black key that hung about her neck. Then she went inside. She bathed herself and kept the key around her neck the whole time she was in the bath. She never took it off anymore. Something scratched at her bedroom window after she went to bed. Coraline was almost asleep, but she slipped out of her bed and pulled open the curtains. A white hand with crimson fingernails leapt from the window ledge onto a drain pipe and was immediately out of sight. There were deep gouges in the glass on the other side of the window. Coraline slept uneasily that night, waking from time to time to plot and plan and ponder, then falling back into sleep, never quite certain where her pondering ended and the dream began, one ear always open for the sound of something scratching at her window pane or at her bedroom door. In the morning, Coraline said to her mother, "I'm going to have a picnic with my dolls today. Can I borrow a sheet, an old one you don't need any longer, as a tablecloth?" "I don't think we have one of those," said her mother. She opened the kitchen drawer that held the napkins and the tablecloths, and she prodded about in it. "Hold on, will this do?" It was a folded-up, disposable paper tablecloth covered with red flowers, left over from some picnic they had been on several years before. "That's perfect," said Coraline. "I didn't think you played with your dolls anymore," said Mrs. Jones. "I don't," admitted Coraline. "They're protective coloration." "Well, be back in time for lunch," said her mother. "Have a good time." Coraline filled a cardboard box with dolls and with several plastic dolls' teacups. She filled a jug with water. Then she went outside. She walked down to the road just as if she were going to the shops. Before she reached the supermarket, she cut across a fence into some wasteland and along an old drive and under a hedge. She had to go under the hedge in 2 journeys in order not to spill the water from the jug. It was a long, roundabout, looping journey, but at the end of it, Coraline was satisfied that she had not been followed. She came out behind the dilapidated old tennis court. She crossed over it to the meadow where the long grass swayed. She found the planks on the edge of the meadow. They were astonishingly heavy, almost too heavy for a girl to lift, even using all her strength, but she managed. She didn't have any choice. She pulled the planks out of the way, one by one, grunting and sweating with the effort, revealing a deep, round, brick-lined hole in the ground. It smelled of damp and the dark. The bricks were greenish and slippery. She spread out the tablecloth and laid it carefully over the top of the well. She put a plastic doll's cup every foot or so at the edge of the well, and she weighed each cup down with water from the jug. She put a doll in the grass beside each cup, making it look as much like a doll's tea party as she could. Then she retraced her steps, back under the hedge, along the dusty yellow drive, around the back of the shops, back to her house. She reached up and took the key from around her neck. She dangled it from the string as if the key were just something she liked to play with. Then she knocked on the door of Miss Spink in Miss Forcible's flat. Miss Spink opened the door. "Hello, dear," she said. "I don't want to come in," said Coraline. "I just wanted to find out how Hamish was doing." Miss Spink sighed. "The vet says that Hamish is a brave little soldier," she said. "Luckily, the cut doesn't seem to be infected. We cannot imagine what could have done it. The vet says some animal, he thinks, but has no idea what. Mr. Bobo says he thinks it might have been a weasel." "Mr. Bobo?" "The man in the top flat. Mr. Bobo. Fine old circus family, I believe. Romanian or Slovenian or Livonian or one of those countries. Bless me, I can never remember them anymore." It had never occurred to Coraline that the crazy old man upstairs actually had a name. She realized if she'd known his name was Mr. Bobo, she would have said it every chance she got. How often do you get to say a name like Mr. Bobo aloud? "Oh," said Coraline to Miss Spink, "Mr. Bobo. Right. Well," she said a little louder, "I'm going to go and play with my dolls now, over by the old tennis court, round the back." "That's nice, dear," said Miss Spink. Then she added confidently, "Make sure you keep an eye out for the old well. Mr. Lovett, who was here before your time, said that he thought it might go down for half a mile or more." Coraline hoped that the hand had not heard this last, and she changed the subject. "This key?" said Coraline loudly. "Oh, it's just some old key from our house. It's part of my game. That's why I'm carrying it around with me on this piece of string. Well, goodbye now." "What an extraordinary child," said Miss Spink to herself as she closed the door. Coraline ambled across the meadow toward the old tennis court, dangling and swinging the black key on its piece of string as she walked. Several times she thought she saw something the color of bone in the undergrowth. It was keeping pace with her, about 30 feet away. She tried to whistle, but nothing happened, so she sang out loud instead, a song her father had made up for her when she was a little baby, and which had always made her laugh. It went, "Oh, my twitchy-witchy girl, I think you are so nice. I give you bowls of porridge, and I give you bowls of ice cream. I give you lots of kisses, and I give you lots of hugs, but I never give you sandwiches with bugs in." That was what she sang as she sauntered through the woods, and her voice hardly trembled at all. The doll's tea party was where she had left it. She was relieved that it was not a windy day, for everything was still in its place. Every water-filled plastic cup weighed down the paper tablecloth as it was meant to. She breathed a sigh of relief. Now was the hardest part. "Hello, dolls," she said brightly. "It's tea time." She walked close to the paper tablecloth. "I brought the lucky key," she told the dolls, "to make sure we have a good picnic." And then, as carefully as she could, she leaned over and gently placed the key on the tablecloth. She was still holding onto the string. She held her breath, hoping that the cups of water at the edges of the well would weigh the cloth down, letting it take the weight of the key without collapsing into the well. The key sat in the middle of the paper picnic cloth. Coraline let go of the string and took a step back. Now it was all up to the hand. She turned to her dolls. "Who would like a piece of cherry cake?" she asked. "Jemima? Pinky? Primrose?" And she served each doll a slice of invisible cake on an invisible plate, chattering happily as she did so. From the corner of her eye, she saw something bone-white scamper from one tree trunk to another, closer and closer. She forced herself not to look at it. "Jemima," said Coraline, "what a bad girl you are. You dropped your cake. Now I'll have to go over and get you a whole new slice." And she walked around the tea party until she was on the other side of it to the hand. She pretended to clean up spilled cake and to get Jemima another piece. And then, in a skittering, chittering rush, it came. The hand, running high on its fingertips, scrabbled through the tall grass and up onto a tree stump. It stood there for a moment, like a crab tasting the air, and then it made one triumphant, nail-clacking leap onto the center of the paper tablecloth. Time slowed for Coraline. The white fingers closed around the black key. And then the weight and the momentum of the hand sent the plastic doll's cups flying, and the paper tablecloth, the key, and the other mother's right hand went tumbling down into the darkness of the well. Coraline counted slowly under her breath. She got up to 40 before she heard a muffled splash coming from a long way below. Someone had once told her that if you look up at the sky from the bottom of a mine shaft, even in the brightest daylight, you see a night sky and stars. Coraline wondered if the hand could see stars from where it was. She hauled the heavy planks back onto the well, covering it as carefully as she could. She didn't want anything to fall in. She didn't want anything ever to get out. Then she put her dolls and the cups back in her cardboard box she had carried them out in. Something caught her eye while she was doing this, and she straightened up in time to see the black cat stalking toward her, its tail held high and curling at the tip like a question mark. It was the first time she had seen the cat in several days, since they had returned together from the other mother's place. The cat walked over to her and jumped up onto the planks that covered the well. Then slowly, it winked one eye at her. It sprang down into the long grass in front of her and rolled over onto its back, wiggling about ecstatically. Coraline scratched and tickled the soft fur on its belly, and the cat purred contentedly. When it had had enough, it rolled over onto its front once more and walked back toward the tennis court, like a tiny patch of midnight in the midday sun. Coraline went back to the house. Mr. Bobo was waiting for her in the driveway. He clapped her on the shoulder. "The mice tell me that all is good," he said. "They say that you are our savior, Caroline." "It's Coraline, Mr. Bobo," said Coraline. "Not Caroline, Coraline." "Coraline," said Mr. Bobo, repeating her name to himself with wonderment and respect. "Very good, Coraline. The mice say that I must tell you that as soon as they are ready to perform in public, you will come up and watch them as the first audience of all. They will play Tumpty Umpty and Toodle Oodle, and they will dance and do 1,000 tricks. That is what they say." "I would like that very much," said Coraline, "when they're ready." She knocked at Miss Spink and Miss Forcible's door. Miss Spink let her in, and Coraline went into their parlor. She put her box of dolls down on the floor. Then she put her hand into her pocket and pulled out the stone with the hole in it. "Here you go," she said. "I don't need it anymore. I'm very grateful. I think it may have saved my life and saved some other people's death." She gave them both tight hugs, although her arms barely stretched around Miss Spink, and Miss Forcible smelled like the raw garlic she had been cutting. Then Coraline picked up her box of dolls and went out. "What an extraordinary child," said Miss Spink. No one had hugged her like that since she had retired from the theater. That night, Coraline lay in bed, all bathed, teeth cleaned, with her eyes open, staring up at the ceiling. It was warm enough that, now that the hand was gone, she had opened her bedroom window wide. She had insisted to her father that the curtains not be entirely closed. Her new school clothes were laid out carefully on her chair for her to put on when she woke. Normally, on the night before the first day of term, Coraline was apprehensive and nervous, but she realized there was nothing left about school that could scare her any more. She fancied she could hear sweet music on the night air, the kind of music that can only be played on the tiniest silver trombones and trumpets and bassoons, on piccolos and tubas, so delicate and small that their keys could only be pressed by the tiny pink fingers of white mice. Coraline imagined that she was back again in her dream, with the 2 girls and the boy under the oak tree in the meadow, and she smiled. As the first stars came out, Coraline finally allowed herself to drift into sleep, while the gentle upstairs music of the mouse circus spilled out onto the warm evening air, telling the world that the summer was almost done. The end.
Okay, so hopefully you've enjoyed reading the story and it's made being at home doing your work a bit more bearable. We're going to just have a quick look at the list of endings again. What I would like you to do, as I said, is just have a think back to the chapter that you've just listened to and see which ones have the endings or which features of the endings are used by Neil Gaiman. Okay, if you just pause the video, and what I'd like you to do is pick one or pick a couple, and then just write it down, and then at the side of it give an example from the chapter that you just read. So where it says what might be resolve or explain unanswered questions, well, we learnt the name of, is it Mr. Bobo, the man upstairs? So that gave us another answer, didn't it? All right, so before that he was just the man upstairs, whereas then we learnt that. You might find an example of a character that was punished or a character that was rewarded. Give me an example of how calm and order have been restored. All right, so I'm not going to give you the answers. I just want you to have a go. So write down 2 or 3 and then just give an example from the chapter that you've just read. And the very last thing I'd like you to do today is I'd like you to give your opinion on the story. So I'd like you to tell me what your favourite part of the story was and why it was your favourite part. And then I'd like you to tell me what you enjoyed about the story. And then the second thing I'd like you to do is tell me what your least favourite part of the story is and what you would change about the story and why. So what would you change if you were the writer of Coraline, or you were advising the writer of Coraline? What would you tell him to change or improve? Okay, and that is it. We've finished. We've done 13 chapters and you've done loads of work, so you should be really proud of yourselves. On Friday, what I would like you to do is I'm going to send you the link to the film. Hopefully it's still on YouTube and you'll be able to watch that. And then what I'd also like you to do is I'm going to send you a PowerPoint show of all the games and some of the graphic novel examples as well of the work that you did and sent in to me. So a bit like an art gallery, just showing all the work. So if any of you haven't handed that in yet and would like that to be part of the show, so part of the PowerPoint, then just send it to me before Thursday, please, because I'm just going to finish it off on Thursday, ready to send out on Friday. Okay, well done everyone. We're so close now to summer. We've got about 3 days left. All right, keep going, and you're doing brilliantly. I think the ice cream van's just turned up outside my house, so I'm gonna do a runner and get one. All right, see you soon.